Well, thank you everyone for joining us. This is what we're considering the second in our Ambassador Career Chat series, which is an opportunity for our ambassadors to learn more about careers in science policy from the staff at JSPG. Today, I'm joined by Julianne McCall, who is the Director of Programs and Outreach at JSPG. Outside of her JSPG work, she serves as the co-director of the California Initiative to Advance Precision Medicine within the Governor's Office in California. And thank you for being here. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm delighted to contribute.
Sure. So I have a few sort of general just career questions we wanted to start out with to get a sense of sort of what brought you to pursue a career in science policy, and sort of what did that career path look like to get to your current role?
Yeah, so I kind of approached my career path a little bit like a series of experiments, similar to the lab. I spent about 16 years in research labs. I counted them up just the other day, and it was 13 labs from when I started interning as a high school student during summers to when I completed a very brief postdoc in Heidelberg, Germany at the end of my PhD experiment experience. And there I go with the Freudian slips already. So I was always involved in educational outreach to the various communities that I was part of. So I was involved in starting up the Central Ohio Brain Bee, a neuroscience Olympiad for high school students. Then I moved to San Diego, started the San Diego Brain Bee. Then I moved to Germany, started the German National Brain Bee. And I'm now proud founder of the Sacramento Brain Bee here in Sacramento, California. So I always knew that education was a huge, it existed as a huge entity within my interest. But I, wasn't totally sure that I was the right person to be in front of a classroom. I wanted to have, I was just curious about how decisions were being made that affected education in the classroom and educational opportunities in general. Having been the director of the International Brain Bee for 3 years, when we had the International Neuroscience Olympiad in Vienna, Austria, Copenhagen, Denmark, and then Daegu, South Korea, just before the pandemic, luckily. I noticed that the most brilliant students often came from nations that did not grant them the same opportunities that I had the privilege of having, and including countries like Iran, where our third place international winner wasn't sure she was going to get into a university that could challenge her in the same way we would all hope to be challenged. So I was just aware of this, the entity, right, the growing, amazing body of literature and knowledge, was out there and inspiring. I was, honored to be a part of it, but I also knew that there was this gap between where our knowledge sat and what tools and information was being used for everyday decision making, especially at the societal level, impacting whole populations, like the student I mentioned earlier. And so I just started to explore, and I was fortunate enough to be an alumnus of the Fulbright program, and joined the Fulbright Alumni Board in Germany while I was living there. My Fulbright was in Sweden in 2006, so it seems like ancient history talking to a bunch of young scientists. But started to get involved in that community a little more, and became a member of the delegation of the Fulbright Academy of Science and Technology. At the time, it's now the Fulbright Association, at the World Science Forum, which is a biannual, every other year gathering of all science ministers from around the world. And oh my goodness, sitting in the Hungarian Academy of Sciences in Budapest, right across from the Chain Bridge, listening to science advisors from Zimbabwe to New Zealand to Korea, just lit a fire within me. This is where I thought I could be a bridge person. So long story short, that was more or less the path.
Awesome. And so as you were sort of, navigating that path, were there any sort of really pivotal moments or any really critical opportunities or resources that you felt were really integral to helping you sort of navigate that sort of career trajectory?
Yeah, I'm one of the very lucky people who was able to get into one of these science policy fellowship programs. These are your AAAS, your CCST, meaning California Council on Science and Technology, which really does hold your hand in the transition into the policy world. It is possible to get a job within the policy world, having a scientific background and not much policy experience already. It's possible, but it's really a luxury to have an entire team of people who are looking out for you, able to anticipate where you might need to bulk up on your knowledge to contribute most effectively. So while I was doing the CCST fellowship in 2016 to 2017, I was placed within the California legislature in what's called the Senate Office of Research. I had the absolute privilege of being invited to speak to groups of graduate students and postdocs and companies, Genentech, for example, to discuss with scientists how to make an impact in science policy, whether it's a career choice or just kind of, helping to nudge your research more toward answering questions of policy and societal relevance.
Right.
And I realized that there wasn't really a great resource out there beyond just the general advertisements of this handful of positions every year for policy fellowships. So I actually created one. I roped a few friends who sat on the CCST Alumni Steering Committee alongside me to help write a career guide for science policy careers for science and engineered trained individuals. So that is freely downloadable. I'm happy to provide that as a link in an email as a follow-up. But I made it my life's mission to collect every single internship, fellowship opportunity in the policy arena that was open and even encouraging of scientists and engineers to apply to. And then kind of just map out like the general structure of government, that you can be a scientist within government, but you can also be like a policy advisor, science policy advisor in government, which is better characteristic of my my role.
Great. Yes, as a testament to that resource that you put together, that document has been very integral to sort of myself as I've been navigating sort of my own policy trajectory. So it's certainly something that
so lovely of you to say.
Yes. So we'll make sure it's circulated among the ambassador cohort for sure. And then sort of one sort of other key question before I sort of open the floor up to those who are in the audience is, within the sort of larger umbrella of science policy, there's a lot of different sort of issues and topics that you can get involved with or really sort of focus in on. What was your experience in sort of finding those issues or those areas that really motivated you? And what advice would you give to someone who's trying to sort of figure out where they feel like they can have the most impact?
What a thoughtful question. I got into neuroscience because of a family experience. My kid sister was born with a neuroatypical brain. In fact, they didn't even expect her to survive to birth. And even then, every birthday, they, set expectations very low for how well she'd be able to learn to read, to speak and walk and, use the bathroom on her own, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was, kind of a automatic mission for my life, right? Since my sister was born when I was 9.5 years old, there hasn't been a single day where I didn't know who I was fighting for, right? I really wanted to impact the world in a way where struggles like hers, for every other person who has a medical issue, who really doesn't deserve to have a medical issue, would be relieved from that struggle. Lofty goals as a 9.5-year-old. And so that was kind of given to me. I realized kind of later on that, that there are so many issues in the world that I can't have an impact on every single one of them. And this is just the nature of our society, that we need to focus. We need to become specialists in order to have an impact. Having that just passion naturally geared me toward the research world, considering in neuroscience, there's still very little for a neurologist or a neurosurgeon to provide for patients for the vast number of neurological conditions that it so far exists. And so that was the realm of research. And so as I was making this pivot to the policy world, I actually found this field of research policy. How do we actually craft and shape and implement a research program to facilitate the outcomes of that research that would be most beneficial, right? There are multiple different styles of research administration, right? You have your blue sky fundamental research. Let's just figure out as much as we can about how nature functions, and let's see what it brings, right? Maybe, transformative understanding of batteries or and energy in general, right? It led to transistors, which pulled us away from gears in computers more toward the quantum physics side of things. That was all fundamental research driven. Or do you need something? Do you see that people are struggling in this, right, in your society for no good reason? For example, in my Precision Medicine Initiative of California that I run, there are Latinas that are dying from a certain type of breast cancer, triple-negative breast cancer, at a much higher rate than their counterparts in other demographics. And why is that? Well, it's because those women weren't engaged in the clinical trials where those diagnostic tests were made official. And you take one step further in the biomedical research, who was donating tissue to study
Right.
triple-negative breast cancer? It wasn't people of color at all. And so we really need to understand that we need to target research in those areas that have led to the health disparities and social disparities that we see. And that's more applied research or translational research. So research policy has become my passion, my channel to solving the world's problems as much as I possibly can. And I just wanted to add one thing. I had terrible imposter syndrome as I was moving from the sciences into the policy world, thinking, well, I'm not a lawyer. I don't have a degree in political science. I'm not,
Right.
the last government class I ever took was in high school, and I was like, barely a good student in that class, not really seeing all of the relevance to my life and my career track. But I slowly realized that, when I am applying my kind of research mind to policy questions, it's all numbers. It's all critical thinking.
Right.
It took a while for me to realize that, yes, actually, I can analyze a data set of 300,000 Californians with developmental disabilities, similar to looking at a data set of genotyping, right? That it's all numbers. And that's something that I wasn't shy from asking questions about to the individuals in the executive branch, different, Department of Developmental Services or governor's office while I was in the Senate responsible for oversight of the executive branch agencies. So if I can leave everyone with one message, it's to empower you to use that scientific training toward policy questions. I promise you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Those skills that I think we tend to think may not be transferable outside of our disciplines are incredibly relevant in the policy space. And we're sort of at a moment where I think we need a lot more people who have those sorts of STEM backgrounds to sort of be engaged in policy. And so I want to see if those in the audience, if there's any questions that you'd like to ask at this time. If not, we have some others that we can, questions that we can work through as well, but wanted to open the floor to those who are here to share any thoughts you may have.
Hi, is it okay if I ask a question? Sorry, I missed the beginning of the session. There was a fire alarm here, so annoyingly I was stuck outside, so I haven't got a total understanding of your background, so sorry if my question's already been answered. But I'm really interested to find out about how you went about finding opportunities to transition from your background in science to policy, because I'm in a relatively similar predicament, but going from European studies and modern languages with some experience in policy from internships over the last year but without the academic grounding in it, and finding it difficult to find those opportunities to go into policy advisory without the academic background.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for your question, Dan. I really appreciate you bringing that up. So my background is as a scientist. I spent 16 years in research labs in Sweden and Germany and Ohio, California, really dedicated to advancing science itself. But then I just, slowly realized just how many gaps there are. And the example I often give when I'm giving talks to large groups of scientists and engineers is just the example of clean drinking water. For how many centuries have we known how to provide clean drinking water to communities, and just how many millions of people are still living without clean drinking water? It's not a scientific problem anymore, it's a policy problem. So I wanted to be part of that, that bridge from the knowledge base and the evidence base to the policy making. So I would comfort you in that an academic background is less impressive to people in policy as real world experience. So the fact that you've been doing an internship, right, the fact that you're part of JSPG, and getting out there in the real world and understanding how policy works. Something I tell my students all the time. I'm faculty at UC Davis, University of California, Davis, and University of California, Riverside, in addition to teaching a US-Japan science policy network. One of the things I continue to repeat is that government, like so much else, is just a network of people. Mm-hmm. There are no strict requirements for entering that arena. And I have to say, when I was making that transition and looking into opportunities like AAAS, the American Association for Advancement of Science, like CCST, the California Council on Science and Technology, that provided these policy fellowship opportunities, I was also looking for like institutional policy advisory positions, like at EMBL, the European Molecular Biology Laboratory, was looking for a director of their education program that would also have a little bit of a policy bent to it. As I saw it. So I realized that as I was applying and just navigating opportunities like that, I realized that so much of my volunteer efforts, like with the International Neuroscience Olympiad, the fact that I directed international world championship competitions for 50 countries was really helpful in understanding, event planning and organizing, cross-cultural groups of, cross-cultural committees and directorships. So put those things front and center, right? I'm sure there is, there are wonderful resources for how to adapt your resume, your scientific or your CV or resume to a policy crowd. I remember being in awe of a friend of mine who I roped into helping with a youth ethics education program that I was running in Europe. And he literally helped out for maybe 6 hours over 2 weekends on his resume that he sent to me to provide some feedback before submitting it to the company of his dreams. I was amazed at how he had contributed to the development of philosophy of children's ethics, and I thought to myself, wow, when did you do that? That sounds amazing. He's like, oh no, that's the thing that you pulled me into. Like for me, in my resume, it was one line. Like 3 years of work was one line of my resume, right? Yes, I was director of religious education or ethics education for this organization for this long. That's how it landed in my resume. In his resume, I mean, he was fostering the youthful thought leaders of the next generation. And so, yes, a little bit of orienting toward the language and culture of the policy arena would be really helpful. And I'd be more than happy to serve in that role for you. Really love to be a support.
Thank you very much. It's really helpful.
I hope so. Yeah, keep being active. I feel like the more organizations you see with your own eyes, the more organizational structures that you have exposure to, the better professional you're training yourself to be.
Sure, thank you. I think for me, the ultimate, I want to see myself in maybe 10 years at one of those supranational organizations, so the EU, the UN, World Food Programme, Asian Development Bank, and there's a lot of different paths to getting there, and it's just difficult to navigate, especially when you don't have, so at least you have the science background, whereas I don't have a science or a policy background, and finding internships that open the right doors, which then open the right doors, is difficult to visualize. I was just wondering if you have any tips or thoughts on what I should really be doing in the next 5 years, because I've considered, for example, public sector consulting, but then that might be a bit too much of a broad focus on policy advisory. There's always researching an NGO or a think tank, which I have an offer for next year, I think, potentially, but whether or not that's at a startup, whether or not that's the right move is still a question in my mind. So yeah, I'd really appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah, I was listening to an interview of Atul Gawande just recently. He is an author of Being Mortal, Checklist Manifesto, a number of really impactful books. He trained as a surgeon and has really gotten into policy recently. He was hired on as an official of USAID,
Right.
foreign support. And his advice is, before you're 40 years old, say yes to everything. Just
Right,
get involved. Just, broaden your understanding, right? The things that you don't know, right? Just dive right in, head first. And then after 40, start saying no to everything so that you can really specialize.
Yeah.
So, what really helped me was attending these conferences, going to the World Science Forum, and realizing that all of these amazing people who are leading UNESCO, who are leading the European Commission, who are leading the International Council of Science Policy, they are just people. They love having coffee like anybody else. They love making jokes like anybody else. They're curious like anybody else. And so just being in those places with those people, right? So if you can look to, and so often, especially as a trainee, you don't have to pay the $1,000 registration prices of many of these conferences and events. So really take advantage of that. So events for sure, but also, right, in the virtual world, right, follow them on LinkedIn and post some thoughtful responses to their ideas. Show that you are helping spread their messaging. Right, there are multiple angles to connecting with individuals who have that decision-making power and can connect you with people that they know to help expand your network in that way, right? Again, it's just a network of people, and it's finding the right place, the right time, not to be dismayed if someone is slow to respond to you, right? You know that they're busy. It's not that they don't want to respond to you more often. It's the case that they are just busy, and so you have to wait for that right moment. I see we have one more minute, and I want to give Matt the opportunity to wrap this up. But Dan, it's been really a pleasure, and I look forward to connecting with you afterwards. Please do let me know how I can be of help.
Likewise, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. That was a tremendous amount of advice that I know that everybody who's will be watching this after will really sort of take great value from. So thank you again, Julianne, for joining us. I hope it's okay. I may reach out and make sure the ambassadors know that they can reach out to you, because I know that they would greatly benefit to hear more about your career and get more advice from you. Thanks for everyone who attended today, and look forward to sort of having more of these kinds of career conversations in the future.
Lovely. Thank you so much once again for the invitation. Have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll be in touch.
Absolutely.